So, working along from the end of the room, Mr. Adam Eden. Can you please introduce yourself, Adam?
Hi, yes, my name's Adam Eden. I'm 50 years old. I started my own company literally 30 years ago when I was 20. And the sort of productions, I'm a production and a post-production house, but I actually grew up with a very famous father, Jack Eden, who started surfing in Australia as a sport back in the 50s and 60s. So I actually hated being on set, and I was taught how to cut on a Steenbeck and shoot 16 film and do all that sort of stuff. So I got into electronics. So I'm actually a fully qualified colour scientist and broadcast engineer, traditionally from Sony and Panasonic, worked all around the world doing that. Then basically in my early 20s, like, okay, hey, let's get back into the film industry because I could see things were getting thrown away. So a lot of the devices that you have today, MP3 technology, DCT compression, all this sort of colour science. I was one of the engineers that actually designed half this stuff when I started working for them when I was 16. So I go way back. So for me, it's always been about delivering the best quality vision on the screen, the best quality outputs, no matter what the device is. And for me, we set up workflows for people. I've got full-time staff who've been there, like Aaron's been there for 16 years and Sean for...
So this is your post house in Surrey Hills?
In Surrey Hills, yeah. So for us, it was always about getting the best image we possibly could. I adopted 16:9 before anybody else did, with all the anamorphics, how we used to stretch and pull and all that sort of stuff in those days. And now, for us, I'm a fully end-to-end Dolby Vision facility. So we don't just do Dolby Vision just in post. We actually shoot natively in Dolby Vision, which I can talk about at a later stage. Everything that I work in is always in 4K HDR, no matter what the output and the delivery is, because you're future-proofing what your investment and what the people are actually paying you to do. So there's no reason why people should be scared of HDR. It's a very simple process, and I'm going to help demystify a lot of those sort of dramas that people get scared about.
Mate. So just the people who don't know, you're a shooter as well, yeah?
Yeah, I'm a DOP.
Yeah.
So I've been a DOP and colorist my whole life.
Yeah.
But in the old days, sort of film and all that sort of stuff, and it was a bit more trickier.
All right. Marcus?
Hi, Marcus Smith. I'm a colorist, have been for about 15 years, professionally 12, 15, yeah. Been in the film and TV industry in the post for about 20 years. And I started as a graphic designer, a broadcast designer, worked my way up to online editing, and then all these pesky DOPs kept on coming in and wanting their short films graded. And so I was like, okay. And then I was like, oh my God, this is really fun. And then I thought, oh, maybe I'll have a crack at being a full-time colorist. I'll sort of master the craft. I'll give it a go. I'll master it in a couple of years and I'll go and do something else. Well, 15 years later, I'm still here, completely in love with the craft and slowly getting better every day. And I think I'll probably be at it for the rest of my life. And I've had the great fortune of working with some very talented Australian and American DOPs, some of which are here today. And I think what happened after that, colouring for many years, I was sort of in the time period where everything was moving to digital, and a lot of companies were trying to start and try to figure out how to do colour grading. And so I was one of the first to sort of build those pipelines. And so I've always been involved in the technical component as well. I think I was the first one to do HDR in Australia in 2017 on a documentary. And that was very hard. It was a lot of scratching my head. So I'm very much connected to that moment. So I feel like I understand. If you're new to this, I really do feel for you, because it is.
It was hard, wasn't it?
It's very hard. And it's probably the biggest transition you'll go through in your career. I'm just going to say it.
Adam just said it was easy.
Right. Yeah.
No, but it's because we figured it out for you.
Yeah.
We've all made the mistakes.
So I'm going to try and put myself in your shoes if you are new, and I would love you to, if anything doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And there's a few things I'd like to maybe break down tomorrow that I found confusing when I first started.
Yeah.
We'll go through that.
Yeah, that's great, because you guys are both doing sessions tomorrow. I first met Marcus because Blue Post, Marcus works with in Melbourne, they're sponsoring this. And his boss Pete said to him, do you want to come down and grade some drama? Yeah, I'd love to, because I'm in Brisbane. It's going to be on Apple Colour. And it was really defensive.
Final touch.
Final touch it was back then. I said, I don't mind, it's work. It's never bothered me. So we were down there at the time doing Offspring and Rush and a few of those shows around 2010, 11 sort of time, I suppose it was. when I first met
You
you.
saw me before that when we were.
Oh,
in,
that movie.
Yes, when I did
Planet X.
Extra, which I'll
Oh,
talk about
yeah,
later.
that's probably a whole session on that
Yeah,
movie.
actually, it'll feature in my look development session, quite short. But I remember you distinctly because you came in. I was like terrified of meeting a real colorist, and you came in, and then you're like, "Oh, show me the reference," and I hit the button, and you're like, "What are you doing that for?" And I put the split screen. So back then, I used to like when you're checking a shot to see if it's matching, I'd put half the screen up. And then, perfect, right? Because I got both.
Yeah.
He's like, what are you doing that for? You just pull the whole thing across and look at it as an image. I'm like, I'll give it a go. I did. I was like, oh, it's so much better.
Just cut it. Just cut it up. Cut it up.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Mr. Allan.
Ben Allan, cinematographer and colorist. Been shooting for 20-something years and grading professionally on and off for 20 this year. And so very, very interested in the whole HDR thing. I've been kind of doing bits and pieces with it for the last couple of years, and I think it is really an exciting time for us because it's giving us a big new palette to work with, and also a level of precision that we've never had before. And so for both cinematographers and colorists, I think it's an exciting time. It's, I think, really great that we've been able to get a group of cinematographers and colorists here together to be able to kind of talk through these changes that affect both sides of the equation.
Ben's just shot and posted his own feature, which was HDR finish, yeah?
Yep. So full Dolby Vision 4K, because why not?
That's right, why not?
Exactly.
And where can we see it?
It's called Dark Noise. It's a little suspense thriller, and it'll be out. We've just been doing some test screenings, and hopefully be out in cinemas fairly soon.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So let's sort of start at the beginning. At what stage should we be considering HDR? Peter briefly talked about it on set. So do you guys think, or you shooters, is it a big deal for you on set, say we're on a movie or on a show, that you see it on set as a monitoring, if it's going to be an HDR finish?
Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll jump in.
We'll talk about your workflow. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean,
We'll talk about what I do.
did you, how were you monitoring?
We have very, very basic monitoring on set, and very deliberately. And so I think we're with HDR, we're really in a transition phase. With most of the audience at the moment will still be seeing most content in SDR, and so I kind of feel like it's when we made that transition from 4:3 TV to 16:9 TV, and there was that few years in between where the clients were all saying, well, what's everyone at home going to be watching? Oh, the 4:3. And
the safe areas and all that stuff,
safe area.
Yeah.
Everyone was obsessed about the safe area.
Yeah.
But you had to be shooting the full 16:9 and you had to be finishing the full 16:9. And so there's this weird kind of in-between phase. And then it reached this point where you couldn't buy a 4:3 TV anymore. And it just suddenly became much less of an issue. And I think we're going to have that with HDR as well. It'll get to a point where whatever the brightness level of the sets that are available, they'll all have some sort of HDR compatible processing within them, so that they'll, even if it is 600 nits, it'll be kind of it'll adapt to that, or if it's 400 or 2000, it'll adapt.
If they tone map it down to see.
Map correctly.
And I suppose in your case, you didn't particularly have a client that was demanding to see that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we had the luxury
yeah.
of just being able to have total control.
Yeah.
Okay, we know the post path, we know what we're doing, it's fine. So that was actually, it's not necessarily a very representative test case from that point of view, because it's actually very easy.
All right, so for Adam, you get a job, you're shooting say a big corporate and it's an HDR finish.
Yep.
What are you doing in shooting that's different?
Nothing at all.
You're not doing
Absolutely nothing at all. I'm pulling up my light meter. I trust my light meter rather than a monitor. Right? I'm still old school like that.
Yeah.
I 100%
Yep.
agree. And what I would say, if anything, HDR just makes that more relevant than it used to.
Yeah, it's just like when you actually see it, if you've lost some details in some windows or things like that, it's when you see it on HDR, it's like, oh wow, some detail in there. It's like it's actually a nice surprise. The main thing about HDR isn't the brightness, it's actually what you see in the blacks. right? And that's what we're going to be talking about, I think, today, because a lot of people think it's brightness. But all of a sudden you get to see detail that we're pushing windows to pull out, and you don't need to do that. Like literally, if you want to see HDR on set, currently I'm using a TV Logic, a 7-inch HDR. That does 1,000 nits pure, straight end to end. You plug your log from your Arri Alexa Mini into the bum of that, and boom, you've got it. That's it, and you're seeing it live if you really want it.
So you're not filling all your sets with candles then?
No, look.
People in bright yellow shirts?
No, because for me, I'm actually more worried about colour than brightness.
Colour volume.
So you obviously got to trust your monitor, and all these monitors from the small HDs, Blackmagics, they're all different. So the main thing I can say is you don't need to go out and buy expensive scopes. And like Stuart's a mate of mine, but someone like Stuart goes out and calibrates all your monitors. Like it's not rocket science. And it really isn't, because the monitors will, a lot of DPs get stuck on the idea that, oh, let's make everything look right.
Is it more like film for you two? Is it more like shooting
100%.
film?
Definitely.
I would say,
100%.
Yeah.
There's more of that where you had a black and white video split, didn't you?
Oh, if
you
you're
were
lucky.
you got your light meter out and everyone's
The light
going,
meter's telling you what's actually going on, and then you've got a little impression of it on the monitor.
Like I don't even look at 4K in the field. I have no need for it.
Yeah.
and then, you know, you'd send it into someone like me and I'd go, yeah, it's all great, it's all good. And
Falling off the edges.
you wouldn't sleep at night, but all the crew and the clients were going, what's going on? How's this going to work? It's all gone dark, or it's... So I see it's a bit more like that. It's brought a little bit more of the magic back. So I can understand the HDR on set. Maybe you get some suits arrive and, oh, this is going to be HDR. Can we see it? What does it all look like? But that's probably one hero monitor, maybe, if you could have it in a tent in the right environment.
They're just happy to have a split.
Yeah.
With the two new Teradeks and the small HDs and all that, that's where they're happy to have around your neck with a battery pack. Like, that's great.
All right, cool. All right, so Marcus, okay, so it's shot. The boys may have done a few different things. You know you're colouring in HD. When do you want to get involved in it?
Well, we do, right at the start, obviously, you know, from the moment we get scripts and things, it just gets bundled into talking about the look of the show. And then the first thing that a new DOP to HDR does is like, oh, we're doing this HDR thing, I'm terrified. I'm like, don't be.
No, that's right.
Let's put that aside, actually. It's the first thing I recommend. So let's just actually figure out what the look of the show is. And the reason why I do that is because it's new, okay? 99% of people, in fact everyone, doesn't have the opportunity to monitor HDR on set. And I think the elephant in the room there is actually, I don't even think it's possible, right? Unless you are in a completely controlled environment, as Stuart pointed out in his excellent intro today, 5 nits around, right? So if you have 10 nits around, so 5 nits is what? The black on the shadow side of that, you know, in this environment, it's probably that speaker, that shiny little speaker up there. It's well, a little bit brighter than that maybe. So it's, you know, if you've suddenly got surrounds in the chaos of a set, you know, there's no way you can get that darkness. So,
I mean, even just like for our eyes to fully adjust from like a bright set to a dark viewing environment takes 5 minutes.
Yeah. So, you know, and also, like, if you think about a lot of the camera on set monitors, you know, they're designed to go to 2000 nits, so you can actually go out. Now, if you actually put a PQ curve on that, you're not going to see most of the image.
Yeah.
The surrounds are just going to, you know, block it out. So I think the only people I hear of doing it on set are, you know, people who are shooting completely in, you know, closed environment where they can actually, you know, tent off everything. So, but in regards to your question, I think what we do is it totally depends on the skill set of the DOP. You know, we're working with DOPs now who've done 2 or 3 series in HDR. So in that instance, we will start straight away with HDR. But you know, I would recommend, if it's new, I would recommend actually, let's figure out the look of your show in SDR. Let's make it look amazing, and then let's translate that to HDR, because you know, we don't have a lot of time in pre, and I find it kind of clouds the communication.
So I know you're going to talk a bit about this tomorrow. So would you sit down and encourage, obviously, shooting the camera test, shooting the normal things you do for a test, and then you do those sort of grades in SDR, translate that to HDR, see how they work, or do you stay at SDR at that stage?
Again, it depends on the time.
Yeah.
But sometimes we only get like a day with the DOP, and they haven't even shot tests.
Yeah.
So you know, in that instance, we'll start with some looks, and then a lot of the looks even happen while it's shooting. like in the first week, often we'll finally see some rushes and we'll see the actors' faces and all the art direction, and then we can actually start building the look. And that's one thing I'm trying to push with our teams now, is just to almost like think of the colorist like a DIT and a dailies operator, and really just keep working with the camera team and building the look as you're shooting in the first 2 and 3 weeks, if you need to.
Yes.
Sometimes you don't need to. So in terms of HDR considerations, I started with that approach. I thought, the DOP really needs to see this. But then I realized, what is HDR? HDR is essentially a translation of all the stops, the 16 stops in dynamic range, to a monitor.
Yeah.
Who is good at doing that? The DOP is good at doing that. The DOP is mastering every one of those exposure ratios. So a good DOP in SDR becomes an excellent DOP in HDR.
Yeah.
And it's not as scary. There are moments, of course, and we'll get into those, where some things don't translate.
Yeah.
But essentially, you've just got more room to move.
Yeah, you've got more room to move. And as a DOP, I constantly say, I recommend to them, I'm like, actually, the best thing you can do to get ready for your HDR show is buy a HDR monitor and just watch shows.
Yeah.
Because you'll get an intuitive feeling for what's working and what's not, and you'll bring that to set.
Yeah. A bit of a backstory. One of the reasons why we got together initially a couple of years ago as a colorist is I got a report from Netflix that a lot of the shows from Australia are all a bit samey. I thought, well, that's not very good. Why they got this impression that what we're producing out of this country. They didn't really go into details, but the fact someone had even raised it is obviously something that they're discussing. So on the back of that, they are really keen to try and give us more time in grading.
Do you mean visually or content-wise?
Visually. Nothing to do with stories. The look of the shows are a little bit warm, a little bit samey, not quite out there. I mean, obviously the budgets are, if what they're comparing them to, it's a very broad statement. But anyway, the fact someone said it means they're thinking about it. So they're trying to encourage more time in a suite, more time to develop the look with the DP, more time to create the show LUTs, more education on how to do this, which is a great thing. How they can actually get Marcus a bit more time in the room, or myself, how that will work, I'm not quite sure with the post house, but the fact it's even in the conversation is a good thing.
Are you telling me that the first 10 years of my career working on TV shows was I made just rubbish?
Mate, do you want me to, should I bring up your IMDb? No, they didn't mention any shows,
I'm
but
just kidding.
Did that time eventuate though, or not? Did they?
No, well, this is only a year ago.
Oh,
and,
okay. So they haven't called the producers and said,
well,
give these guys another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
These would be acquisitions. They wouldn't be commissioned. So from a producer's perspective, it's only now that they're starting to.
That's exactly right. That's on previous stuff, and now they're getting involved in funding. They can have more say on what's happening. So.
But basically, with HDR, the policy that Netflix have is for the producers, it's an opt-out thing. So they assume that there's going to be an HDR deliverable, and for most of the stuff they commission, it's compulsory. But if for most other stuff, they'll be expecting that to be budgeted in, and then the producers might have the option to opt out of HDR.
From what I've been told, it's Dolby Vision only, that's it. Full stop.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, which basically means you only deliver one.
Yeah, one IMF master.
That's it.
That's one of the big things for them, is that there's this one deliverable that everything serves all the different outputs.
All right.
It's mainly just Netflix now, right? Because Stan and Amazon, I'm pretty sure, had to deliver SDR and HDR on both flavors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Netflix is kind of the pace car, isn't it, at the moment?
Andrew from Amazon will be here tomorrow. Hopefully will enlighten us a bit more on what they require and things that we can do to work better with them, which is great. The fact we've even got the dialogue happening is really good, and I believe that Netflix will be moving a person here as well. So, let's go back. So okay, Marcus, you've done your test. Tomorrow you talk a bit about your look development and how you get that. So okay, it's the first day, you're in the grading suite, it's an HDR show, you've got all your monitoring set up. sort of things are you looking to do that would be different than if it was an SDR show?
I think, nothing. You know, in the sense that the way I like to grade is sort of like start by looking at what the DOP has done and really key into that and make sure, you know, we've already had chats, we've been talking all through the shoot. And so for the first time, often it's just this big sort of happy sigh seeing the thing in HDR. It is an absolute joy.
You have to do anything,
I'm so
do you?
excited for you guys to really like key in on it. Like, and one of the things I'll be doing tomorrow is like figuring out who actually has seen HDR, and we're going to get you in front of that monitor for at least 10 minutes if I can, because you really have to suck it in to understand. But we're just doing a case in point, and this flies into the, you know, there's a show we've been working on at the moment, and it's all shot, you know, on the beach pretty much. And so they'd only been seeing it in SDR, you know, watching all their exposures, but shooting into the horizons most of the time. So a show like that in HDR, you know, when the clients came down and actually saw the first parts of the grade, they were just freaking out. Like, absolutely, you know what it's like.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's like you've got half the exposure of the camera, which is normally chopped off, opened up, you know, and they're seeing things that they hadn't seen before. They were kind of there, but now they're really kind of coming to focus. So you ask the question, first thing I do is just look at it and figure out, okay, I'm cross-checking it with the SDR and thinking about what the DOP is thinking about, and then I'm thinking about, is this better? Is it not better? And then figuring out, is there anything that should not be there, you know, and maybe we soften those elements.
How are you approaching that cross-checking process?
Oh, great. So one of the amazing things about HDR, I feel like I'm a little bit too excited, okay, slow down, is it's a bigger container than the SDR container. So you can perfectly display an SDR signal in HDR. So you just convert it, and then your reference is exactly what the DOP saw. With one caveat, obviously, and this goes to thinking about calibrations, why calibration is at the heart of all color workflows, really, and that is where the black point's sitting. Stuart did this great demonstration pointing out correctly that in SDR world, you know, with OLEDs, there's no specification for the black point, so it can be 0. You can have infinite contrast, and this is to your point about, but in reality, the point of the SDR and Rec 79, the sort of intent of it, is to be able to create a master that works on every single TV. And so if you grade at a 0 black point, you're actually not grading, you're seeing infinite contrast, whereas every other person out there is going to see 1,000-to-1 contrast on their LCD screens. So you might want to tweak, and we build custom LUTs at Blue Post to tweak the PQ curve so it's actually emulating 1,000-to-1 contrast ratio in Rec 709 on a 100-nit display. And that would be what I recommend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Adam, when you sit down and say you're grading a show or are you doing anything different? Are you looking at something and going, well, I want to creep that highlight up a bit more, and
I'm actually pulling highlights down because it's so bright. But look, I'll give you a good example. I've got a feature film in the cinemas right now that Tim Benithan shot over 6 years, Big Wave Project 2, all about surfing on multiple different cameras and all that sort of stuff. And for me, he said, I'll give you a flat and ProRes and just scene cut detector. I said, no, you're going to sell this to Netflix and yada yada. And I said, it's not going to cost you any extra for me to grade in HDR. If anything, it's going to take me less time because half the job's been done for you. You've shot
that
it
was
well,
my next question,
right? And we're mixing archival footage from VHS, all this other different weird, wonderful formats, different Sony cameras, GoPros, and all that sort of stuff. So for me to work in a color managed workflow and have everything on the screen sitting there, all I'm doing is I'm mixing SDR with HDR and red and all over the place. It's just making things, they don't need to be at 1,000 nits. They don't need to be at 650 nits. Like, one thing I'm going to really get into tomorrow, and I'll briefly talk about it today, is these average nit values. Like, I put a gradical at 250 nits and 650 nits. And I like to sit about 250. Like, but if something needs to be 100, why push it to 400? There's no need for that.
I think it's one of the big things, because we're used to working in this very, very tight little range of Rec 79, that we feel like we have to use all of the range. And I think if you look at like what's happened with audio, where they've had since digital sound came to cinemas like 25 years ago or whatever it was, that they've had effectively high dynamic range with sound for cinema for that long, for a quarter of a century. So they're really a lot further down this path than we are. And what you see is they don't use that dynamic range all the time. They'll be sitting well down in that range, and then occasionally something loud will happen that justifies using more of that range. And I think it's very much the same with HDR pictures, that we can afford to be sitting down in an area as a percentage of the range that we've got to work with, an area that in Rec 709 would be really dangerous, but in HDR is actually quite exciting and safe.
So the next question, you probably heard the word colour management quite a lot, and in HDR that's very important. I would say probably vital for the thing to work. So we said making it easier. This is colour managed with no grading. So if you're colour managed, and instead of you being non-colour managed and you're dealing with a log image, like a lot of the times you as DP, so you hand over your drive, it's in log, and there's 20 different ways you can normalise an image if you're not colour managed. Some people are using curves, some are contrast, some are lift gamma gain people, some are buying LUTs off the internet. There's loads of ways, isn't there?
They all work.
They all work. There's no right or wrong way of doing that. But colour managed means we could all get the same result using colour managed on our different displays in our different shops. So that's obviously the great starting point.
From the cinematographer's point of view, that's the holy grail.
Well,
But as a colorist, we need to know what you shot it on.
Well,
Full stop.
That's where we come back to our camera sheets that we were talking about earlier. But that is a real key. So ASUS or Resolve Colour Management or Baselight Colour Management, have you got a preference? Who decides?
It has to be PQ. Full stop. ST 2084 1000 net. That's for Dolby Vision. And what I'll talk about tomorrow as well, maybe today, is the trims for if you need a HDR 10, if you need 100 nits, if you need 600 nits, anything. It all comes into this one master, and now the 48 nits, 47 nits for the cinema, it's all now built into trim mode as well. So just as long as you've got color calibrated monitors and everything, I'll keep on going back to that all the time.
Totally.
So I'm curious, out of the people here, who's familiar with the concept of the trim pass and how that works? Okay. So for the rest, once you've done your HDR pass, then the concept of the Dolby Vision or HDR10 or HDR10 Plus is that you've got this embedded metadata with the file that tells it how to interpret that to different brightness levels. And so you can do that. HDR10 is basically an overall one for the whole project, and then Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus allow you to get in shot by shot and tweak how that's converted to different brightness levels and displayed on those different devices. So
with mixed results, would you say?
Yeah. I think it's still early days of that. It's improving rapidly.
I've had no issue at all. Zero, honestly. And the reason why is, again, these average nit levels. Like if someone wants to really pump something up really hot, well, how's it going to fit 18 stops in a 7?
Yes.
Right? So, honestly...
more of an issue.
I'll give you an idea. Last year, young Matty Fez, he couldn't be here today for personal reasons, was colour grading at my studio, and I was helping do the master and the online and the whole lot for Head Above Water with Gil Marston, McAvoy Media. And what you were saying was that we need to create looks and that. So Matty and I came with some ideas and some looks, and then Matt further developed them and away we went. But when I did the trim pass on his work compared to somebody else's work from a studio, there was literally, it took me, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours through the Dolby trim pass, and I hardly touched anything. When someone else came in with their stuff, and they were pumped up to the shithouse to make the HDR look like the SDR or vice versa, it was really
work
hard.
together on that collaboration.
Yeah, that's right.
The other way that it's very easy to get caught with the trims is, and I don't know if you guys have come across this at all, where there's an SDR version, like the cinema version, done first, and everyone's happy with that and falls in love with that. And then you do an HDR version. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, we can push this and do a bit more here, a bit of this and that. And then you've got to do the trim pass, which is what most people are actually going to see. And everybody wants that to look like the SDR version that was done, but you've got to do that with a different set of controls.
Yeah. I mean, I think CJ here has had that experience personally where you just finished a grade with us and in a feature film and then had to convert it to HDR.
Feels so backwards. You've already graded it, and you do the HDR, and then you've kind of got to go back and trim it to where you started.
Have you had much experience with HDR then going to theatrical? Because I know Dolby Vision have...
Yeah, I've had a little bit of experience with that.
And the conversion's quite good, because I usually find the Rec 7 to 9 conversions.
Well, there's a new license which I've got literally today. That's got the 47 nit trim pass and the 103 as well.
How do you go convincing clients to do it that way around, like rather than starting with the theatrical?
I just tell people bad luck, you're starting in 4K HDR.
Well,
Full stop. And it's in the cinema right now.
You're a production company, so that is easy. But
In my experience.
I think conceptually, it's the difficulty that everyone still thinks and wants to think of the cinema version as that's it, that is the version, and everything else is a...
But hang on, okay, well, look, but I'm cheeky in the way that a lot of my clients don't even know what 4K HDR is because I'm only delivering 1080p anyway. But I'm still working natively in 4K HDR Dolby Vision because it takes me half the time to grade it.
Yeah.
Full stop.
I might be a heretic here. I might have a slightly different opinion, and that is that...
Yeah, come on.
No. It's like these filmmakers, they come to us, they know exactly what they want. So the first thing I go is like, what do you care about the most? Do we care about the theatrical? Do we care about the TV version?
Yeah.
Do we care about the HDR version? And there'll be one thing that they'll really care about. So let's do that first.
The trick with that is then you end up in that situation where you're doing it 3 times instead of twice.
Well, I'll take you through a workflow to help you with that in the look development. We did that on Blacklight. We started with theatrical and then we went through all the different mediums, including Dolby Vision Theatre.
Wow.
And I'll take you through a really great workflow.
Yeah. I mean, Ben, you'd be going through this for your movie. I mean, where the eyeballs are going to be on, TV, tablet, cinema, if you break it into those 3, then so many people are just watching things on iPads and things, aren't they?
Well, that's why...
A lot of those displays are HDR already.
Yes.
And that's the new process, sorry Ben.
You're right.
Dolby Vision in version 18 of Resolve comes with that. Now you can actually export in MP5 in version Profile 5 and Profile 8.
Those things have...
And they work.
The new generation have Dolby Vision built in.
Yep, they all do.
Hardware level built into it.
They've had them built in since an iPhone 7.
Really?
So it's been around about 5 or 6 years. So for me, when one of my biggest clients is MG Motors, and I make all the MG car ads. So when you walk into one of their dealerships and you see the screens, I'm going to hit you in the face with 1,000 nits worth of buy me, right? And it works because that's being loud and shouty. So by having that here and having the difference that these iPads and things pump out, the new iPad pumps out 850 nits. Yeah. So if I'm pumping out a super in your face at 850 nits, which we're delivering now, you're going to have more call to action and more attention at catching people's eye.
You know why that is, don't you? So you can read your Apple Maps in the sunshine.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's the only reason that is. Yeah. Watching a movie is a side thing.
I'd love to walk into JB Hi-Fi and it's like, they're going, we're going to take this HDR thing seriously, and everything is like 5 nits on the wall. You know, everything. I buy TV immediately.
There's a little spoof. There's a spoof film we could make there, couldn't we?
Oh my God, you guys get it.
But hang on, that's one good point about Dolby Vision is, and then I'll shut up about it because I love it, as you can tell, is Dolby Vision takes over your whole TV set. So if you've got it, the colours saturated, black and white, all over the place, as soon as you play a Dolby Vision movie on Netflix or stick in an MP4 like what I'm creating, Dolby Vision takes over every control on your TV and makes it look as tone mapped as good as it can to my BVM 310. And that's why Dolby Vision's #1.
So we talked a bit about this at the drop-in, Ben, didn't we? So the Game of Thrones Dark episode, if that had been Dolby Vision, it was a different ballgame.
That's right.
Well, it could have still been...
Well, it was still compressed.
They didn't do the good trim, but point.
Yes, it would have certainly been.
I rewatched that episode about a month ago on the the MacBook Pro
Yeah.
in 1000 nits,
Yes.
and it's a very, very different experience.
Yeah.
Very different.
Well, I tell that story because it was like, obviously not many people talk about colorists, but when it becomes an internet sensation, like these things are quite amazing, like the gold dress.
Yeah.
Remember that one? Anyway,
Blue dress.
the blue dress. I see what you did. So I sort of always say as a warning to people who are grading at 0 blacks in SDR. Basically, that whole problem came about because they were seeing infinite contrast ratio. So they will look at they set their SDR monitor to 0 blacks, had probably 100,000, 200,000 to 1 contrast ratio, and they were seeing all these amazing things, that no one else saw. So
The other thing, just picking up on 2 threads there, SDR and JB Hi-Fi, and the concept of SDR being 100 nits really doesn't exist anymore outside the grading room. You cannot buy a TV that will only do 100 nits because you walk into JB Hi-Fi or Harvey Norman, look at all the TVs there, most of them are at least 300 or 400 nits. And it's because if they made them 100 nits, they wouldn't sell any.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because people are going, oh, that one's bright and colourful, I'll get that.
It's usually on a demo mode as well, where they literally boost.
Bump it up
Yeah.
to the roof. Yeah.
yeah, it's you picking up on your absolute nit thread. Like I think we should keep reminding that, to everyone, and keep talking about it, because never before in the history of imaging have we got a system where the DOP on set can say, I want it to be exactly that, and it can go all the way
That's exactly
to
right.
the monitor in people's homes.
I've literally tried this on test shoots where you take a light reading on set and go correlate that with the camera's exposure curve and go, well, that should be sitting at 900 nits. And you take it through a color managed pipeline without touching anything at all. It ends up on the TV at 900 nits. That's amazing.
Amazing.
Where you're kind of going, this is going to end up exactly that with a level of precision we've never seen before.
So yeah, in a word, it's clarity. And you'll see it on some of the. I've seen some of the shows that you chose, like Crown and stuff. Like it's this clarity that's coming to the imaging.
I like to think of it more as it's not even so much about the high dynamic range, it's about precision dynamic range for us. It's about being able to go, I want to peg it there, not there, not there, there. And that's really exciting.
Well, the colour actually makes more storytelling now creatively because of the brightness and because of the extra colours and things that you have.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot more input creativity now. So
So back to Dolby Vision. So then, why are we still doing our analysis to 100 nits if no one's really watching it at all at 100 nits?
well, that's the reference of scale.
Because that's their standard.
Yeah. That's the standard.
Personally, I believe that standard needs to be updated. I think it
Yes.
simply needs to bring out
Yes.
a 2020s version of, but not 20, Rec 20,
Yes.
like for this decade, version of Rec 709.
And one frame rate too. Thank you. 25 frames.
Yeah. It is.
At
It's
least
due.
200 nits.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, it's very, very unrealistic, I
Yeah.
think, to be going, because no one's ever going to see it at 100 nits once you leave that room.
No.
Yeah.
So are you saying if then it gets played back on the average television that's 300 or 400 nits, that your work's going to look...
3 or 4 times brighter.
Correct.
But not in HDR.
Not
No.
in HD.
No, because
No.
it's got the
Yeah.
scaling built into the dog.
Yeah.
Correct.
And that's why a lot of people in SDR like the low con look, because they know it's going to be pumped out and be really
Yeah.
bright and contrasty
Yeah.
when it gets brighter.
It's fascinating to think. So you could buy like brand new HDR TV, LG great, and then it's like you watch the HDR version, like this is amazing, and then you switch to the SDR and it's brighter, like a lot brighter.
Yeah, but we can,
10 times
but we
better.
can do a 600 nit trim pass as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Then
Oh,
it
yeah.
will average between it. It won't. It
Yeah.
will work out the differences.
Yeah, I guess I was referring to a separate issue, and that is the idea of the absolute standard versus.
Yeah.
Like you can't actually even pump up a HDR TV very well for now.
To
Anyway.
take that example one step further, okay, there's a number of really high-profile films and shows that have had most of their highlights around 200 nits in the last couple of years, like really good stuff. And if they're finishing their HDR version with the highlights generally around 200 nits, then that's going out in Dolby Vision. People watching that Dolby Vision feed will see it at 200 nits. People watching the SDR version of it
It'll be brighter.
on a 400 nit TV will be seeing SDR that's twice as bright as people who are watching HDR. And that is literally happening at the moment with the shows.
So my way around that is, so my 310's at 1,000 nits, and then my PVM 25. Stu, what do we get that to?
I think we ran it.
270, isn't it?
Yeah, we brought it down a bit to 200, I think.
I think
I thought
it's really sensible.
Yeah, so for the SDR, I'm looking at 200, 250, it's roughly about that. So when I do a Dolby trim pass, they look almost identical, except for obviously the speculars and that are going to pump out more.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're looking
You're
at
trying to judge 1,000 nits, 100
you can't.
outside.
You'll get the 100 nit trim, want to turn it up, and it's wrong.
Marcus, what's your SDR display?
100 nits.
100 nits, and your HDR is this, you got the Flanders.
We've got the Flanders and the X300.
Right, okay, so you got
That's
both.
where, like, we've got it a bit easier because we can just go, well, I'm working to that, that's that, there's the story.
Yeah.
Whereas you're going to be expected to work to the technical standards that are out there.
No, not necessarily. That's definitely one of the first things I do with the DOP is go, okay, how bright do we want it? And we just sit there and go, yep, no. And usually it finds itself.
But in terms of the monitor calibration.
In terms of monitor, yes, perfectly 1,000 nits.
Yeah.
I don't think you're allowed to even. I think Netflix and Amazon.
Yeah, it has to be 1,000
It
nits.
has to be 1,000.
And 100 nits for SDR.
No, they don't. No.
Do let you.
They do specify it as 100 nits.
Oh, no one's checked on me, touch wood yet.
The actual specs are between 100 and 120.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when Andrew Smith came around last year when I was doing this stuff with Matty, we were looking at it, explain to him this is the reasoning why we're doing this, so the SDR looks fine. And then when I did all the outputs and masters and the deliverables, because I couldn't give them a Dolby Vision file, I had to do a HDR10 trim pass just to double check things, and I did a couple of little tweaks. And the SDR, there wasn't much, but for the first time ever, like he can say the same thing tomorrow, we went through QC with not one error.
Wow.
And they've never had that. And that's what Dolby Vision gave us, because all the metadata was there for the individual clips, and we still got to go through all that bloody metadata and all that sort of crap, the Dolby stuff, Metafire, just to check things and put things in there. But that's all it is.
Yeah, no, it's getting to be a really solid format.
Yeah.
And I think you were saying Resolve 18 makes all the kind of techie stuff a lot easier.
Yeah, you
I
don't-
haven't actually seen it, but you were telling me.
Yeah, just go deliver on here, and you'll see it. Have you got Dolby Vision turned on yet?
And while he's doing that, can I get a show of hands? Who knows the difference between HDR and Dolby Vision? All right, wow, okay, cool. All right, so I think this is really important.
Advanced settings, sorry.
Because this is the thing I found really confusing. They were throwing out HDR10 terms, HDR, Dolby Vision. What does it all mean? So Dolby Vision, Dolby came up with the PQ curve in their laboratories, and then turned it into an open standard PQ curve, which is essentially all HDR is. Strapped on to a high gamut, which is the P3 and the 20
talk about
gamut. So a lot extra color and this particular PQ curve. But that isn't Dolby Vision. That is actually just HDR. That's the standard HDR. Anyone can grade in HDR. You don't need a license. You can just go for it. Dolby Vision really is a special tech that turns a HDR master into SDR or any sub format. So it's the proprietary tech that they own. You need a license for it. But the good news is, if you don't want to pay for a license, you can download it illegally. No, you can't. You can actually use it, the analysis, without a license. So you can get it to. You can see its magic source. So I advise you guys when you first start playing around.
So I think it's quite funny actually that you get the secret source for free, and then you've just got to pay to manually override that.
Yeah. True.
So you can't use any of those trim controls. That's basically it.
So
you can analyse the whole timeline.
it looks pretty good.
Shot.
Well, let's go slow. Let's just show. Why don't we go real slow? Because I think this will really help. So let's start with. Okay, we haven't got time. Do we have a HDR shot?
What's analysed? There you go.
Okay. The other very confusing thing about talking about HDR is knowing what you're looking at. This is not HDR.
No, you've got to look here. It's just showing the controls.
That's the output that actually is in the PQ curve.
So we've got HDR, SDR.
So up here we've got an image. We might do a normal grade, and we obviously lock it off on the HDR monitor. Those highlights are looking a bit peaky. Warren, do you reckon you can drop them down?
Speculars?
Yeah. Nice. All right, DOP, how are you feeling? You like the shot?
Looking good.
No, it's
probably
that's not
in here.
HDR monitor, that is. Have a look.
Looks good in HDR.
All right. So, so we've
Selected.
done our feature film. We've got a lock.
Dolby Vision.
Next to the color. So now this is HDR. This has nothing to do with Dolby Vision, technically. We hit we go to the Dolby Vision controls. Now we want to turn this into SDR. We want Dolby Vision software to analyze the frame and create its own curve to turn it into SDR. So to do that, we just go to the page, we hit selected, and it analyzes the clips. It's going through frame by frame and coming up with all this metadata. And first thing you'll see, which you can't see, so I'll just sort of yell it out. Down here, you're going to get 3 values. You're going to get a min, which is the black. It said there's 0 blacks in this. The max, which is the brightest brights. It's all in linear, so it's between 0 and 1. And the average, so what the average brightness for the pixel is. And then basically it then comes up with its tone curve. To turn it on, you just hit this enable tone mapping preview.
It's on here. It's done it. It's done it on the SDR.
All right, cool.
It's on. It's done it. So that's now your tone map to SDR.
Yeah.
So turn it on and off and show me.
Not easy to turn it on.
Yeah,
and
just
off.
that, just to uncheck that.
There,
No.
Oh, it's not.
No.
Because you got it on the dual output.
Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just comes through automatically.
Yeah.
Oh, just a trim was, just make sure it's in the right mode.
Yeah, it did it. It did it. It's done
Oh,
it.
okay. Well, that's because it's got the dual output.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the dual output,
Yeah.
it just changes it.
And so the Dolby
Yeah.
Vision part obviously does this. So you can do the analysis and the output all for free. What the license does is it gives you this extra layer of tool set which you can then change. So you've got your simple lift gamma gain sort of paradigm grading.
Don't touch the lift.
The highlight lift is probably the most important one in the sense that it's your typical S roll-off kind of thing. And the chroma rate and tone detail is just further tweaking the algorithm to, I find it as a texturizer tool.
Now this changed for Dolby 4, didn't it?
Yeah.
Doing these adjustments is your trim pass.
Yes.
Is the trim pass.
Yeah.
So it's
And
trimming the auto trim.
Yes.
Yeah,
So there's the auto tone map,
Yeah,
and then you go in and trim that.
that's right.
is there anything?
And this isn't touching your HDR at all.
No.
It's just metadata.
It's just
Yes, it should only be changing this
But
guy.
this is part of the
Yeah.
HDR process
Yeah.
in order to get back to SDR.
What's an you mentioned HDR 10 trim pass. What was that? What did that mean?
Okay, so basically, if you want to, so for Amazon last year, they can't take Dolby Vision, so they want to take a HDR 10 pass.
So basically,
Yeah, go on.
Oh,
You were going to do it.
So Dolby came up with the PQ curve, which basically it gives us this curve that will give you, out of a 10-bit signal, potentially no stepping up to 10,000 nits. That's its purpose, which you couldn't get with any of the existing formats. So they go PQ curve, this is HDR, and then they put their analysis and secret source and metadata around that, and that's Dolby Vision. The PQ curve with a project level trim is HDR 10, and that's open source. And so TV set manufacturers that don't want to pay for a Dolby Vision license for the TV sets can go HDR 10 and still have HDR.
It's technically not a trim, I think. Am I right in thinking that? It's just essentially,
It's not scene by
just
scene
data.
analysis.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's an average for the whole overall.
Yeah.
So it's the Dolby Vision system treats it as a trim pass.
Correct. So do you want to go on there for a sec?
So
Trim
HDR
controls?
10 Plus
No, we are.
enables metadata on a
You want HDR 10 ones?
Dolby Vision.
Yeah,
You want the 10 ones?
Just click here.
Open source.
Trim controls.
With the
It'll say HDR 10.
problems of open source in that it
There you go.
doesn't
That's HDR 10.
have the precision of Dolby Vision
That's it there.
does.
Yeah.
Yep.
And but it's more flexible. So it's open to more manufacturers.
Yeah.
But if essentially Dolby Vision and HDR 10 Plus do basically the same job, which is
Yeah.
take a PQ HDR signal and provide shot-by-shot metadata about how to down-convert that to different levels to what it was mastered at.
And Dolby do an amazing job working with panel manufacturers and stuff to, certify is probably not the right word, but like ensure that the tech is working on the panels correctly. That if you have a 500 nit monitor, it's going to trim that, it's going to look right.
So I guess that's the other thing is you do your trim pass at say 100 nits and you've mastered at 1,000 nits. If that gets played on a Dolby Vision enabled TV set that's capable of 500 nits, what it does is interpolate between those two different levels. So it's actually figuring out how to best tone map that to the level that the set can manage.
It's really quite noticeable on if you have an iPad that's older than 2 years, iPad Pro, and you pull up some HDR content, that's when it's really working its magic, because it can't reach zero blacks. And as we know, all imaging, most of it is in the black mid-tone and a little bit upper mid region, which is very low on the PQ curve. So if you have, a monitor that can't display, zero blacks, then you really want to lift up that curve so that we don't get the same situation that happened in Game of Thrones, So that's where Dolby Vision really excels. And look, it might be that HDR10 takes it over, and we might be sitting I've been thinking about this recently, like in a weird time period where all of the Dolby Vision shows are looking amazing and everyone's TVs are matching, but it could possibly not go that.
My best guess of what's going to happen is that because HDR10 Plus doesn't have a license fee involved, I think most of the TV manufacturers will start including that, but most of the content will be delivered for Dolby Vision. So most sets will, probably in 2 or 3 years, this is guesswork, but I'd say probably in 2 or 3 years, most TV sets will have Dolby Vision enabled, and
everyone except for Samsung, basically.
Yeah.
That's it.
But they'll all have HDR10, HDR10 Plus compatibility as well. And so it then just becomes more of a deliverable issue to whoever's streaming it.
So basically, to answer your question, the HDR10, just go into the deliver page, please, Woz. In the tone mapping, just check that's in advanced. Dolby Vision, that's right, yep. Now, that's a 100 nit trim. So if we want to make a ProRes file, they'll now do the tone map version in ProRes. And you click that tone mapping button again, please, mate. They're all the outputs. So if I need, it was a 1000 nit BT 2020, ST 2084 for Netflix. Just click that. Output ProRes 422 HQ like they want.
This is straight as if you wanted to go to, like, if you wanted to make an H265 to send something.
Yeah, now you can actually make, just click on that. You can actually make a Dolby Vision master now. See that? So basically that's Dolby Vision. That's the H265 master.
This is new in 18, isn't it?
That's in it now.
So Dolby Vision Master is one where it's all that amazing metadata, shot by shot, you've made your trims. So that's just sitting there. Normally that goes in a sidecar file with a QuickTime. That was the early adoption.
Yeah.
And then later the MXF IMF standard came in where it was muxed together. But the problem with that is nobody has all this sort of tech to be able to show a client. You want to send it to an iPad. Well, that's what this now gives you. It's brand new. I've never seen this before. I'm very excited.
Yep.
Normally what we have to do is grab the sidecar, grab the QuickTime, and then get a
AWS or something, that's it.
And type it up. It was a nightmare. And then it took like 5 hours to render and stuff. But
so
now,
you can now render straight out of there.
Yep.
Straight out of there. It muxes it together.
Or upload it straight to Vimeo. In Dolby Vision. They take Dolby Vision off YouTube.
Pumping out Max 4, Max CLL values now? Or is it
if it's in the standard.
Yeah.
So if it's not in the standard,
so I think I'm going to do the Dolby Vision tools to pump it out as.
I think you can actually export in the previous version like that with that data.
In Dolby.
Yeah. No, in HDR10. Was that the question?
So with, let's say Netflix, they require Max 4, Max CLL.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can't get it from Resolve, at least on 17. So you'd have to use the Dolby Vision.
There's a
tool
trick
to
you can. I'll
analyze
show
it.
you how.
It's pretty simple.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But you've got to make sure you've done analysis on the whole job,
That's
not
right.
to the shot.
And you have to grab it. Yeah.
That analysis stage as well is not something you can skip. You've got to do that before you start.
And it's
But are you still giving XML Dolby Visions passes still? Because like at the moment, like I haven't even been getting asked for them anymore.
Yeah, we work with a lot of different vendors all around the world. So everyone's got their different level of tech stack. So you just got to But
because of that analysis stage as well, that's why Dolby recommends quite strongly that you do HDR first and then move your way down to SDR from there.
But I'll be showing you tomorrow. You don't have to. And a lot of seasoned DOPs who've been doing it for a while, for good reason, decide not to. And that's more come from the American studio tradition, where they've had color scientists furiously creating a perfect output for every look. But us mere mortals don't have color scientists on the team, so I'll be taking you through what we do instead.
That'd be great.
So,
Cool. Then I'll tell you the exact opposite. No.
But there's a valid point there in that there are different ways to approach this. And there's I've done a couple of things where we've done the HDR first, and it's something where it really lends itself to HDR, and then it's just becomes soul destroying to squash that down to SDR.
Yeah.
And other stuff where that process works really smoothly.
in terms of how long, say you're grading for a week, say 2 days on your standard 44 minutes, a TV show, Netflix show, 2 days say for a 44 is normal. Then the trim
in HDR, no. So what
a day less. Is it less?
More.
More. So how many days now for a 44 minute?
Like for a Netflix show, maybe. I mean, it varies obviously, but we would push for 4.
Great.
3-4 days.
Brilliant.
Just for HDR, and then a half-day trim.
Half-day trim.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good.
But then we,
trims,
the trims are very fast. Yeah.
They're very
2
fast.
years ago, they were kind of saying 2 days for the trim.
Yeah.
Well, that's because everyone's.
That's what we tried. And then they said, nope, you're doing it.
No, that's the argument I was
But I
saying.
think it is getting faster.
It is.
Yeah,
getting
but
better. Yeah.
that argument I was talking about before, like people pumping the average level at 500 nits.
Yeah.
This doesn't need to be like.
Yeah, and that comes through the theory of what it is. It's not a tool to make things brighter. It's a tool to expand what you're already doing in SDR.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because I would have thought the HDR would have been the same, if not quicker. How many, forget HDR,
yeah.
how long would you normally be spending on a 2 hour,
guess it's
on a
kind of
44-minute show?
It's probably like everything with the machinations of, when business hits art, the sort of rules of the game have got nothing to do with the actual practice. And I think what sort of happened is it's serendipitous time where, there's a lot of competition for high quality content. And so a lot of producers are sort of tying in the notion of what is HDR to be a better looking show. So that comes with, you want a better looking show, we need to spend more time on it. So it's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But again, that wasn't necessarily because someone sort of took the advantage and just did it out of the goodness of their own heart. It just actually came accidentally because they thought HDR took longer. So
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
It's funny the puck shifts like in weird ways. I found in my career, sort of, it doesn't necessarily go the way. It's not like the linear programming of time.
The other thing with, say, Netflix is that you only get to see the HDR on an HDR set if you've got the premium. This is what you were talking about the other day.
Yes.
If you've got the premium package.
Got to have the premium package.
But that's also part of the business equation for them, that it's driving the higher paying customers for the networks, the streaming networks. And also, if you look at the TVOD outlets, so transactional video on demand as opposed to subscription, the TVOD outlets also give pride of place to HDR content. So for producers, there's an incentive to have good-looking HDR content out there, whether it's going to SVOD or TVOD, because the high-paying customers are likely to see that and see it more prominently.
Ben, SVOD, TVOD?
So SVOD, subscription video on demand, TVOD, transactional video on demand, so that's like rentals and sales through iTunes or Google or Amazon, whatever. Subscription is obviously Netflix, Stan, blah, 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 Disney. And then AVOD is advertising driven, which is going to be all of them pretty soon as an option.
Oh, wow.
So, and Netflix just this week announced they're going down that path. Disney, I think, has flagged it as well. They'll have a cheaper option.
With adverts.
So, well, let's ask you a question then.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Mark Toy's movie.
Mark Toy's movie.
What happened there? So, what do you grade that in the end?
Yeah, that was just SDR. That wasn't HDR.
It was never HDR?
On this.
Right.
Yeah.
What was the reason for that?
It was 2 years ago. There wasn't an HDR requirement for it at the time.
That's how fast.
I'm surprised he didn't
That's how much
chomp at the
it
bit of it.
changed.
I thought he'd want, he's always cutting edge technology, right?
He has probably got his own version that he's probably done and mucked around with.
Right.
But at the time there wasn't.
Yeah.
There wasn't a requirement because he made that movie off his own money and hadn't sold it anywhere, so there was no one saying.
Right.
All it was, we needed a 4K delivery.
Right, okay.
Is this the one he shot in Asia?
Yeah, Monsters of Man, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
he's called for a TVOD release on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, at the point he was releasing that, HDR was out there and it was a thing, but it wasn't at the impact level that it's at already now. It's really changing that rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think it's fair to say the reason why we're all in this room is because the SVOD, like Netflix and folks like that, started demanding it.
Yeah.
Because I've been in the room so many times with producers, and you're like, hey, you've just spent all this money on this film. It's fantastic. Now let me tell you about this whole new medium you've never heard of. It's with bright lights. It's much brighter. They just freak out. And it costs more.
Yeah.
You know, it's not very fair to them at that, you know, that stage. So
Yeah, I met a colorist in Warner Brothers, and she's graded Gone with the Wind 4 times. 4 times, NTSC, then HD came along, and she goes, "Oh, I can't wait for the next 10 years." They give her another call. There's this thing called 4K.
Wow.
Come back in, do it again.
Got a regular booking with today. Technology.
So Adam, what's new from Dolby?
All right. Well, basically, if you want to, this is showing in the field, like there's S-Log on the left and on the right. That's what you're actually seeing with a HDR monitor. So you just want to quickly skip through a couple of them.
Yeah, there's a couple of new things, isn't there?
That's the same thing. Okay, so this is a really good one showing HDR image capture. Like,
full screen on that.
so you can actually see the headroom of the dynamic display on the SDR compared to the HDR, and it just shows more of the original camera image. So that's a really good representation. They can see straight away what you're actually seeing is what you're getting, and it's not being clipped off in the blacks or the highlights from Rec 709 curves and things like that. So what Ian's put together with just the basic slide kit from Dolby Vision the UK. Just go to the next one, mate, with the pencils.
Well, actually, could we stop there? Because I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate, because I'll be the DOP that sometimes in the room that comes in and gives these really great, very annoying insights. That it's sort of not true to say that we haven't displayed the entire dynamic range of a camera, because we in SDR we do.
Yeah.
We roll it off.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
And that's where I think some of this, some of the logic of this stuff does break down.
Yep.
Sometimes.
Okay.
On those.
So we never clip anything. Any good colorist would never clip any information. They'd see it and they would choose exactly what zone they want to see. And sometimes it isn't just the mid-tones, sometimes it'll be the highlights only, you know, very rarely.
But what this is talking about is just a standard Rec 709 Arri LUT. Yeah, or something like that. That's what we're.
Every light doesn't clip anything.
I'm just okay.
Yeah.
Well,
That's an engineering.
that's an engineering term that I'm just trying to explain.
Some of these people might be thinking, so I'm just going to...
No, okay, yeah, okay.
If you're doing a colour space transform, that's what would happen.
Go to the next slide. It's got the pencils.
This is good.
Yeah.
If you're doing
Do we have any soft toys that we can...
technical transform, that's what would happen.
Yeah, that's
But
right.
of course, that's not how we colour grade and deliver images. That's not how we shoot stuff. We use a lot of the dynamic range of the camera,
Yeah.
and then the colorist
Has to pull it back.
has to push that into whatever format that we're delivering in, and that goes right back to film.
Well, I'd even say...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I would say
you've
that...
got this. Sorry.
No, go on.
Yeah.
40,
Yeah.
15 stops on the negative, and you're squashing that into
Squashing
Rec
it.
601.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's only if you're shooting negative. If you're shooting ectochrome, you're not. You're lucky to get 7.
Yeah.
I think...
That's my hero.
I would say the colorist doesn't push it into the zone, because the DOP has chosen the perfect relationship that they want the image in.
Yep.
So, you know, the colorist would just be tweaking, you know, and enhancing and stuff. But we don't decide the dynamic range. That would be a DOP decision.
Yeah.
You know,
But we
certainly can.
We don't
but-
ignore that headroom when we're shooting.
Yeah.
So-
You wouldn't ignore the headroom of the camera's capacity.
You build it into your lighting, don't you?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, in some ways, HDR gives us a more range to work. And it was practically harder when we went from film to those terrible early cameras,
That just
where
got
all of a
chopped
sudden your
off your
dynamic
highlights.
range went like
Yeah,
that.
that's
true.
And
That's right.
That did
it's
happen.
so
Yeah.
hard to get a good-looking cinematic image
Yeah.
because you're battling those.
You had to do it all with lighting.
Okay, so
Doing it all with your lighting
Yeah.
ratio.
so what Ian's talking about with this is shooting with not log. So that headroom has been cut off the side.
Yeah.
Just a normal video camera that doesn't shoot log. That's what happens.
Alexa camera.
It looks very good.
It is one of the things about the Alexas are beautiful cameras, but one of the amazing things about what most of us love about the Arri look is the LUT, the way it rolls off the highlights and doesn't clip.
No, there's only one LUT. You got Sony Blackmagic's got like 64 or something now, and
So-
the Red's got about 100 and
So,
something now.
boys, what about this one then?
Yeah.
We can see stuff out in that window. Oh, we'll never see that. That will clip out and it's graded.
Wow.
Now,
that's a whole
in the case,
conversation.
that
Yeah.
ain't going to be the case now,
Well,
is it?
okay, so a good example of that then is look at the log, because if it's in the log, you're going to see that in the HDR.
It's going to be there. That
It'll
person
be
that's
there.
walking around out that window.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I never look at log in the field, very rare.
That's a great example of
Yeah.
maybe where a colourist would step in and go, no problem, it's there, we'll just dial it out.
Yeah. And
It's very rare I'd see that a DOP would shoot something with an actor, like someone in the background that doesn't want to be there. You know?
Yeah, and the other things that sometimes can draw your eyes, those speculars off, coming off door handles and those things you don't expect, where someone opens a car door and you get something that's really high coming off there, which you go, I don't.
It's quite distracting.
Yeah, and
Well, go
those
shoot
sort
the
of things
sun.
we've
and
got
then
to fix.
It goes like this bluey green
Yeah.
tinge, and you've got, if we shoot at the moment, it's white.
Yeah.
In HDR, you've got this rainbow of colours. You've got to fix and paint all that back.
True. I feel like don't want to trivialize the whole thing, but I guess from my point of view, if a DOP has decided on a dynamic range and there is an issue in the top corner, we can certainly go back to dialing it out.
Yeah.
So it's not like
that prevents you from doing
that's
that.
right. Yeah. So it's never really been. I've never really had an issue. The biggest issue I find, and a lot of new colorists, HDR find and DOPs find really troubling, is the sharpness of the highlights and the colour of the highlights.
Yeah.
And that's to do with sort of other factors, the NTF curve of lenses and how it's displaying on the monitor and everything.
Yeah.
And we can go into that, but there's ways to handle that as well.
Yeah, and
So
I guess to a large extent with most of the high-end cameras now, particularly the ARRI, we're used to having that roll-off in the Rec 709 light. And so you've got to kind of deliberately introduce some of that rather than having it just kind of built into that transform with the light.
yeah, good point.
And
Well, in the old days, it was black promise, white promise that you actually create artificially, right?
yeah. Which of course film did naturally as well.
Yeah.
That was kind of built into the stocks.
Yeah.
And the whole process there.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's almost like that when the DOP does get to see it for the first time, they're like, oh, okay, I'm seeing all this extra stuff. Do I want to see it? And then you could argue, well, obviously what would be better is to have that full round trip. Maybe the best place for dailies on HDR set would be to be in dailies where the DOP can sit by themselves at the end of the night and the team can see it in HDR and actually make those calls. Or if they can do it on set, that'd be great.
One of the things that can be disconcerting for a cinematographer looking at HDR is if you haven't got a roll-off built into the workflow, like with a show light or something, then you are seeing highlights cutting off at, say, 1,000 nits. And
Or less.
Or less.
Yeah, about 650, that's when they start blowing out.
If you're looking at a Rec 709 technical conversion of that, again without the roll-off, you'll be seeing harsh, which we associate with video. We associate that look with cheap video. And so that, I think, can be very disconcerting. And that's not inherent to HDR, that's just that where that's been built into the LUTs that most of us are used to working with in SDR, that's got to be added as a separate layer in these new workflows.
Yeah, just being super mindful of that. Yeah, one great way to do that is to have just have some sort of chart that has all the stops of the camera on it, and you can literally see how it rolls off on the waveform. You can obviously spend too long looking at charts, but testing is a great way to do that.
Yeah, testing. So back to my buddy Shane, who actually works for Dolby over in the States. He said when he graded his 5th HDR feature film, he said, I wish I could go back and grade the first 4. So you cannot practice enough, I think, and just try and get any display that you can, like even these SDRs, we're saying we can get 300 nits out of them. There's the LG OLED Pro over there in that room there, have a look at that. Obviously there's the Asus ones, and just if you can get your hands on any of those and just start playing around. You've got to learn how to connect the thing up, get your settings right. Once you've done that, then just the aesthetics and grading, which is different, and just start playing.
Pictures do behave differently.
Oh yeah, totally do.
Different things.
Yeah, and whether you're in ASUS as well, that's going to be slightly different than if you're colour managed.
Yeah.
Are you ASUS or depends?
Agnostic.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which way is most stuff going for you guys?
Well, it's slowly, ASUS is slowly rolling its dominance out into the industry. It's fantastic.
Slow burn.
Things. but not everything. And so we just sort of asked the team what do they want. Well, certainly all our VFX pipeline is 100% ACES.
Yeah.
But in terms of the colour pipeline, we try and be really open to the colorist and what do you want to do, you know? Because it is a different feel, as you know, grading in it.
Yeah, well, see, for me, my pipeline has always been Rec 2020. It's never been ACES at all,
Right.
from the get-go, because I never liked it. I don't like the transformations, what it does to Rec 709, like especially archival footage. It just turns it to shit. Like Dolby doesn't touch it, doesn't do anything to it. And it just lets it be what it is. Through the dynamic metadata that it's, when you turn the button on, you can see the difference on your monitor when you turn it on and off.
Yeah.
Right? Just in the normal HDR mode, it doesn't touch the footage like ACES does.
Yeah, Marvel disagree.
Oh, well. Look,
They're probably not working.
no, but the
VHS footage.
No, but no, that's right. So
I've definitely. I think there's a lot to be said for ACES.
There is,
But I've seen drone footage and gimbal.
it's awful.
and it doesn't work.
That's
and
right.
you try so hard with it.
If you're shooting
then
Arri
you
all
give up.
day, no problem. But if you're mixing it with all this rubbish, that's what
I'm
the
with
issue
you,
is,
Adam. I'm with you. Yeah, there's some fantastic, but they are improving it.
It will
ACE
get there.
2.0.
Yeah.
Hopefully at the end of the year, you know, they're sort of what are they not? What's it? Not for profit. You know, crazy inventors getting together, but they're doing some cool things.
Working at a post facility, I find that people that have worked in ACES tend to then stick with it. But
Yeah.
who hasn't is very
It's-
like, oh,
yes.
I want to touch that.
Yeah.
So I think once you kind of dip your toe in,
And
you get a feel.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on your VFX pipeline.
Sorry,
CJ?
Like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's maybe
Yeah.
preference,
Well, we do a lot of
Early days as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That experience with those bad ones.
Like with the Dolby Vision analysis, all this stuff is getting better at a rapid pace. And so ACES in 6 months' time might be a completely different beast to what it is now.
But in my pipeline, this works on our flames. Like I've got 2 proper big flame Linux boxes, works a treat. So that whole pipeline, we're not actually touching the Arri footage ever. Like every time it's being touched, if you've got to paint something under flame, or now we're the flamers, aren't we? Because you can do so much infusion, it's nuts.
Yeah.
So we're flames now, to a point, for me, it's getting more of a thing of a past unless we want to do like full-blown VFX work and stuff.
I mean, the power of ACES is, you know, you've got an out-of-the-box colour pipeline, and a lot of us don't have someone to do that for us. So, you know, its function is very important. But if you do have a bit of knowledge about colour transforms, and you want to control your whole pipe, then maybe it's not, you know, maybe it's not the best for you. So it really it can be it really depends on, you know, who you have on the team. But I can see for a cinematographer, it'd be amazing because you don't have to question it. You know, it'd be like, oh, we're doing ACES.
Yeah.
I don't need to chat with anyone in post really about what's going on. You know.
Yeah.
And that is
cool.
The real power of it.
Yeah.
all right, thanks a lot, guys. It's really good. Thanks. We're going to take 20 minutes, have a break, dive out, then Pete and myself, we're going to come up and we're going to attempt to colour something and get it up on YouTube, which is what Pete does. So we've gone from there, we're going down to another level of... Thanks, boys.